then. So today got it. So today we're going to talk about a big model for short-term rental success, unlocking your financial freedom through Airbnb. So let's start with wealth building. We're here today to talk about wealth building. That's our what. But to me, when I think about wealth building and wealth, I have to think why. If I have $1 million, $2 million, $10 million, does that bring me anything? If I'm stuck on a desert island with $10 million, how does that help me? So wealth building, in my perspective, for just the sake of building wealth, isn't the whole picture. For me personally, and I think for a lot of people, our why behind wealth building is to achieve financial freedom, right? To be free to spend time with our families, to be free to pursue our passions, to be free to pursue the work that we're, excited to get up in the morning, and to take breaks when we want to take breaks. I had the opportunity to really experience financial freedom about 1.5 years ago. I guess it's been about 2.5 years now, where I had my Airbnb business to a point where I could leave with my family. My wife and my son was going in the 5th grade, and we moved and lived in Athens, Greece for a year. So I was still working. My wife was still working. We were working on the business. We had our Airbnb business, and she has a online name change business. But we were able to have the freedom to move to another country and experience that culture and give that opportunity to our, at the time, 12-year-old son. So to me, wealth building is about achieving financial freedom. And so how do we achieve financial freedom? How do we get free from the 9-to-5 rat race and the keeping up with the Joneses? And a lot of people will agree that the way to do that is to acquire assets that will pay for our lifestyle. So instead of faking our lifestyle, instead of spending too much on a car or a house or fancy clothes, the first step in financial freedom is to acquire assets that will pay for the lifestyle, pay for that car that you want to drive, but through cash flowing assets. And that's what we're going to talk about today, and that's what Airbnb for me is all about. So my interest in real estate started kind of at an early age. I was in maybe high school, and I had a number of friends, went to the beach house, went to the river house with friends, and it was really their families' houses. And I remember asking the parents, when did you buy this property? How'd you come about this property? And the story was the same in both cases. Well, we bought this a little while ago, and we bought this beach house for $43,000. And that just stuck with me. That stuck with me in high school, college. When I graduated from college, I really started thinking, man, where are those deals for us? Is that just something of the past? Is that ever going to happen again? Am I ever in my lifetime, going to find that type of opportunity for wealth building and for appreciation? So I went on to become a tech entrepreneur, started a number of different countries. I'd like to start a country, that'd be fun. But in 2018, I sold a company, and I was 48 years old. And I just thought to myself, man, I got to do this again. I've never had a W-2. I've always been an entrepreneur, started lots of companies. I always enjoyed it. But at 48, I'm thinking I got to, start something from scratch all over again. Well, at the time, I had my first cabin, and I had bought the cabin just as a family getaway place and ended up putting it on Airbnb, and it was doing well. It was making a couple of thousand, it was cash flowing, a couple $1,000s a month. Let's call it $2,000 a month at the time. And I said, well, maybe I'll lean into this real estate thing a bit. And so that summer of 2018, I had sort of the fortunate opportunity to buy 3 cabins. I didn't really set out to buy 3. I bought one from a wholesaler, and it needed some work, so it was sitting for a little while. And then a second opportunity came around to buy a cabin that was on the market, and the owner of that cabin also had a second cabin that was not on market, it was an off market. So I basically ended up acquiring 3 rental cabins in the course of the summer. Since then, I have hosted 1,600 guests and 1,600 5-star reviews. But that experience of being able to have more than one property really allowed me to start to really understand what was going on with Airbnb and the tools that surrounded and supported Airbnb. And I really got to see the opportunity that was there beyond just maybe $2,000 a month. So I became the short-term rental advisor for real estate investors who want to get started with Airbnb and optimize their portfolios for profitability. And I was able to get to that point from just a couple of cabins by really digging into the technologies and the opportunities, and really came up with some systems that I found I was able to repeat and teach others to do. And so let's overview today. We're going to talk about what is the opportunity with Airbnb. We'll talk about how to find profitable, high ROI investment properties, what to do specifically that others aren't doing in their listings, and how to set up your listing and optimize it for success, and some of the strategies there, pricing it for occupancy and automating the operations so that we don't have to spend our entire lives working on this business, that we can achieve that freedom from our desk, the financial freedom and the freedom, the work-life balance type of freedom. Sound good?
Yes.
All right. So diving right in, the opportunity. Let's talk about Airbnb and the short-term rental opportunity. I'm going to use it for a term we always talk about. I talk a lot about Airbnb. I use it, but I also mean it interchangeably with the word OTA, online travel agencies, VRBO, Booking.com. Those are the biggies. Airbnb, VRBO, Booking.com are the big short-term rental online travel agencies. And so the strategies and tactics. So if there's someone in the room who says, well, I've got a property and I'm on VRBO, don't check out. Everything that I'm going to say today when I use the word Airbnb refers to the other OTAs. However, Airbnb specifically is now bigger than the world's top 5 hotel brands combined. Just imagine that, right? You're Marriott, you're the Hilton, those groups, and within a very short amount of time, all of a sudden, this startup, these 3 guys that have this crazy idea about renting out air mattresses on people's couches, have completely become a bigger brand than all 5 of them combined. In fact, they're worth 3 times more than the top hotel chains combined. That's a lot. That's a lot of money. Well, so that's fun, but why do we care about that? We care about that because we can partake. We can get a piece of that, right? So I can invest in Marriott, and if I put $1,000 in Marriott stock, if I was lucky, maybe at the end of the year, even 5 years ago, maybe today, I don't know that the stock's going up much, but a stock return, I can participate, sure, maybe make 10%. But Airbnb has democratized, they're making their platform, their reach, their audience available to us. So we can participate. We can make a small investment in our own property and leverage their reach, their platform, to make significant incomes for ourselves. So for example, I currently have 6 cabins. I have a 7th Caribbean property, and I have an 8th property that's coming on board like next month. We're in final renovations. But those 6 cabins alone generate top-line gross $60,000 a month in gross revenues. We bring about 50% of that to the bottom line. So you can see the financial freedom with just a couple of investment properties can be achieved with very few properties. Some people say 3, some people say 5. Not sure exactly where in that journey I would have considered myself financially free, but I was able to, backing up to my 2018 story, I didn't start another company. I went full in on my Airbnb investments, and really haven't looked back. And so sometimes I'll tell, this is maybe a takeaway that you can share with your clients that are maybe looking to, so I'll speak to you today as individual investors and as agents, right? I love coaching agents and speaking with real estate agents because A, you get real estate, and B, you have clients that can benefit from this. You can take this information and repurpose it to them. And what I tell people is that you can have one short-term rental property. Not only will it pay its own mortgage, but the cash flow from that will pay your primary home mortgage. And we've repeated that, I have about 100 and so coaching clients, and we've seen that thesis prove out, time and time again. And usually, in addition to just paying for the rental property and the home mortgage property, it's providing additional cash to reinvest or to fund your lifestyle choices. So that's the big opportunity. Can't really overstate that. This is a really unique point in time in real estate investing. There's lots of real estate investments that have been around for a long time, but this idea of short-term rental investing, facilitated by the platforms like VRBO and Airbnb, are relatively new in the scale of time, in the timeline of overall real estate investing. So the opportunity is here. It's here now. It's not too late. It's still very much in the early phases of the potential for profit. So if you're thinking you're a little late, you're not, but now is a great time to get started. So how do we get started? Well, we need a property. I talk about finding your where. So a lot of people will ask, where is the best place to buy a short-term rental property? One way to answer that question, there's lists. You can Google it. There's Airdna puts out a list every year, top markets, small, medium, large markets. People might pick Las Vegas or Miami. And I would agree with that. However, I think we've heard of finding your why. I talk about find your where. Find a place that you like to go. So within every major metropolitan area, be it Charleston or New York or Washington, D.C., or Bend, Oregon, Fargo, North Dakota, there's a place where people like to go. So ask yourself, where do you go? Where do your friends, where would you go for a long weekend? Where would you go for a romantic getaway? Where would you go just to get away? So those areas, you're not the only person in your city that's thinking along those lines. So within a couple of hours drive, there's places where people like to go. Maybe they're beaches, you guys are on a beach coastal, area, but across the country, there's beaches, there's rivers, there's lakes, there's mountains, which are my favorite, and wine countries, right? There's a real surge in these sort of local wine areas. I live in Maryland, and Virginia is real famous for having these different wine areas. I pulled up a map of South Carolina. I just Googled it. It didn't make it into the deck today, but wineries in South Carolina and sort of the whole northwest, quadrant of South Carolina seems to be dotted with these wineries. And that's a place where people might want to go for the weekend and get away. And so just starting with a brainstorm of where do you like to go? Where do your friends like to go? Where would you like to get away for a long weekend is going to help you get a start on where you might want to consider consider making an investment in a short-term rental. And then we'll talk about some of the data, how you analyze those areas here momentarily. But I think it really starts with finding a place that you would like to go, that you're passionate about, that you would enjoy spending some time at, and then we'll dig into the data and make sure that that is a good investable location. Advance my slide here. So I personally love the mountain spaces as an investment. I started in the Shenandoah Valley, which is, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but it's sort of in the middle northern side of the Blue Ridge Mountain Range. And when I began coaching, I started coaching people that were from the DC area, a lot of friends and family before I was coaching professionally. A lot of people just noticed what I did and were wondering, was this something that they could repeat, not exactly in my same area, but in sort of surrounding areas. And what we realized is that, I like to make the joke, there's gold in those mountains. So the Blue Ridge Mountain Range is 550 miles from southern Pennsylvania through the Carolinas into Tennessee and Georgia. And all of that green space, if you can kind of squint your eyes and see the difference in where all these white dots are, these are all Airbnbs, and this whole green area is the whole Blue Ridge Mountain Range. Anywhere in that range is a great opportunity for identifying a place where people might want to go to get away for a weekend, and conversely makes a great short-term rental. The other thing that we find about areas like that is that we're able to repurpose real estate. So if we're talking about a beach location, it may be that that beach house has always been used somewhat as a rental. So when you go to buy it, you're going to be buying it under comparable sales values that have a baked in aspect of rental to it. So even if the owner wasn't renting it, the comparable houses had been rented most likely for some part of a season, or that season's even growing these days with Airbnb and things like that. So if you can find a place in an area that's not priced as a price per square foot comparable as some type of rental unit, your ability to buy that at a lower square footage and achieve a higher return on investment is really how I like to invest. So I buy these getaway houses that were, maybe the family used it on weekends and then aged out of it, the kids went away to school, and you're buying it, maybe at $150 a square foot or $200 a square foot, as opposed to, $300, $400 a square foot at the beach. So what are some other areas I did some quick looking in South Carolina. You've got your major markets, right? The coastal markets, Myrtle Beach, Charleston, Hilton Head, Savannah. Those are all great. If you love the beach and that's where you want to be, everything that we're going to talk about today applies, and you can run a successful short-term rental business in those major markets. Some secondary markets in your state are these, Columbia, Augusta, Greenville, interior, smaller cities. And there's great opportunities there. You'll see, it's not the best map here, but you can, controlling the zoom. But if you were to do this is a second step. Outside of finding where you think you want to go, one thing to do is to log into Airbnb and sort of zoom around and find these pockets of Airbnb listings. And when I did that, I identified a couple of other markets that aren't the major South Carolina markets or these secondary markets. These seem to be more like getaway markets. I saw Lake Hartwell, Lake Marion, over in the mountains, like the Clayton, Lakemont, that might have got kind of into North Carolina, but all of it back to that mountain range again. All of those areas that currently have Airbnbs and are supporting maybe 50, 100 or more Airbnbs, is going to be a viable market because there's already listings there. So once we've determined some areas where we might want to go, how do we find out if that is a really good place to be? And there's a great tool. So I think my Zoom controls are overlapping my PowerPoint controls. So this is a great website. It's called Airdna. You can go there, you can plug in any zip code, and you can get some basic information about the demographics for short-term rentals. So Airdna gets all of their information from Airbnb, and they package that up in some really unique ways to give you investabilities and rental potentials for an area. You can get some basic information for free, but once you want to dive in a little bit further, you can pay for a subscription. It's about $19 a month. And it's not something that you need to keep for a long time. It's something that you can use to evaluate a market, decide whether you want to invest there, and then cancels the subscription. So it's a really small investment, $20 a month for a month or two. And there's a couple of things that you get here. First is this overall market grade. If you can see this market grade A+. So this is Luray. This is a market that I invest in. And then they break that down. If you can see, I know you guys are kind of sitting far away from a big screen. So I'll read it. There's, like 4 or 5 main categories: the demand for rental growth, seasonality, regulation, and investability. And those are some scores that Airdna creates to inform you about those factors, like, is there high demand? Is it very seasonally affected? Is regulation very high? So some areas of the country, you've probably heard the stories, right, where Airbnbs aren't legal or they're highly regulated. And how do you find that out? Well, Airdna will give you a real quick glimpse on that. And I think that's actually part of the free look. But then as you start to really decide what's your financials going to look like, you can, Airdna provides you average daily rates here. In this market, it's $236 a night as the average daily rate. You can see a little graph, and you can see how that changes over seasonality. And then it will show you what the occupancy is like and what the average property rental revenue. So in this case, it's showing an average property rental revenue of $5,000 per month. We can talk about this. This is something I get into with coaching students. These are averages. So in terms of occupancy, we're going to do better than the average. And in terms of daily rates, we're going to use some tools and we're going to do better than average as well. But this is a good way for you if you start to look at a house, okay, and then maybe it's a $300,000 house. How can I start to build a pro forma to understand what my returns are going to look like? And Airdna is a great tool for digging into that data. Let me just take a quick pause right there. And is there, before we move forward from this property selection component, are there any questions?
Are there any questions? Cool.
No, we're good so far. Thanks.
Okay. So once you've identified and purchased your property, you're going to want to get it set up, get your marketing set up on Airbnb. And this is what an Airbnb listing looks like. This is a cabin of mine. You can see it starts with a big cover photo and then goes on to show more photos and details about the property. Airbnb is great in that they do a lot for you. You hear some bad press where people complain Airbnb doesn't care about me, but as a host for 3% of your booking, they handle all your marketing, your advertising, your booking calendar, collections, guest reviews. So I think it's a pretty good value for what they provide. And this is what an Airbnb listing looks like. I'm sure many, if not most of you, stayed in an Airbnb. But that's just an example of what a live listing will look like. So which brings us to the second, once you've picked a good location and a good property. So what do we do differently than everybody else? How do we navigate all of the decisions to make this listing, we say make it pop, right? How do we make it stand out? So the first piece of advice is to start with a single platform. You may have heard the advice. The advice is often floated around. Why not just list everywhere? If it's free to list on Airbnb, it's free to list on VRBO, it's free to have my own website, inexpensive to have my own website. Why not list everywhere? We'll get into that in a minute, but it's just not a good idea, and particularly as you're starting. So when you're starting out, for simplicity's sake and for some more technical reasons that we'll dive into momentarily, you're best off starting with a single platform, be that VRBO or Airbnb. So what else can we do to make that listing stand out? Macro and micro amenities. Macro amenities are the big things. Maybe it needs a deck. Maybe we can put in a hot tub, maybe, something big, right? Maybe we build a screen porch or screen in a porch, something to make it stand out. And then the micro amenities are just the small details. We put in our kitchens, we fully load our kitchens. We put in crock pots and blenders and waffle pans. We go a little over and above. People want to stay in a place that's a little nicer than their own, which leads to decor. Again, in the cabin business, if we go back to that picture, we want it to look like a cabin on the outside. It's kind of rustic and bold, but crate and barrel on the inside. So really clean interior. And that goes for other types of properties too. So let's say it's not a cabin, let's say it's a beach house. That same idea about decor is that we want to keep it clean and crisp and simple. People don't want, grandma's hand-me-downs. They don't want a lot of clutter. They don't want pictures of your family or your personal belongings. And that may seem really straightforward, particularly to a group full of real estate agents. But if you've ever searched around on Airbnb, you'll see a lot of listings that break those rules, right? So the other most important part to making that listing stand out is professional photos. And again, as realtors, agents, you probably already understand that. But 90% of the Airbnb listings out there are shot on people's iPhones. They're dark photos. They don't really highlight the property. And there's some, again, some technical reasons we'll dive into momentarily why having super high, I mean, as best as you can do. Even if you say, I'm a really good photographer, invest the $300, get somebody that does real estate photography and HDR to take the photos for you. It'll make all the difference in the world. And then we talk about the Ritz-Carlton experience. People want to be treated really well. 10 years ago in the vacation rental industry, be it cabins or even beach houses, you send me a check and here's the keys, and bring your own linens, by the way, right? Well, Airbnb has brought in more guests, and the guests are paying higher prices, but the other side of that is they're expecting a real high quality experience. So make sure that you have a hospitality mentality and that you're really ready to serve guests and go above and beyond, and you'll be rewarded for that in your reviews and subsequently in your listing ranking and your overall revenue potential. So really be prepared to be entering into the hospitality industry and really have that mindset. All right, the third most important thing that we'll talk about here is pricing. And what we use is pricing for occupancy. So we want to price the property such that we can achieve maximum 90-95% occupancy. Excuse me. So Airbnb is a search engine. At its heart, it is just like Google. They've got 6 million listings, or take, Charleston, South Carolina, they've got 1,000 listings. In my market, there's 350. They can't show all those listings to someone simultaneously. They have to decide in what order to present those listings. And they only present about 20 listings per page. So it's sort of like Google search. There's only 10 organic displays on the first page. And ask you, how often do you, when you're searching for a doctor or a car dealer or car repair shop, plumber, how often do you go past the first page of Google? It's sort of the same thing with Airbnb. Airbnb, the average guest hits about 18 pages. So overall pages, and a listing is about 4 pages. I mean, there's a little overhead in the search. So the average Airbnb guest is only looking at maybe 4 properties. So we need to understand that and make a lot of decisions based on putting our property on the first page. We need to be a first page host. All right, that makes sense. Well, how do we do that? Well, we do that by understanding the algorithm and understanding what Airbnb wants. Airbnb wants guests to have a good experience, yes. More importantly, it's an economic animal, right? Airbnb is a publicly traded company, and just like Google, they want to maximize their own revenues. And so who are they going to put at the top? They're going to put at the top the listing that's making them the most money, that's making them capitalizing on the lead and the opportunity that's given to them. So if your listing is getting views, the next most important thing is it getting clicks? So we talked about those photos. So the photos that get clicked on are the higher quality photos. If there's 20 listings that show up and the first 3 listings have fuzzy pictures and the 4th listing just jumps off the page at you, that's the one you're going to click on. And the algorithm rewards your listing for that click. It also then rewards your listing for the time spent viewing that listing, even if it doesn't book, even if the guest says, well, that place isn't for me, it doesn't have something I want. You are feeding the algorithm what it wants to rank you higher for the next search. And those are these things that we're talking about here. So the views, the clicks, the view time. Next most important is your booking and occupancy. Did you close that sale? So if Airbnb shows you a lot and people click on it a lot, but you are priced so high, or more importantly, let's say you are on 3 different platforms. And so the nights that guest eventually plugs in to look to reserve aren't available because you're booked somewhere else, you can't close that sale. You can't show the algorithm that you can make that booking. Subsequently, what's the robot going to do? It's just not going to show you next time. It's going to push you down. So if there's 300 listings in an area, all of these factors we need to be maximizing to make sure that we're at the top of the search results, which will then allow us to charge higher rates for further in advance, further down the road bookings, right? So if we take that booking today, maybe at a little bit lower rate, we're going to get the view for the later, we're going to get more views at later dates that might be someone's anniversary or birthday at a higher rate. So there's a whole list here of really important factors: your superhost status, instant booking, wish list additions, your response time as a host. So you can take a little screen capture of that, or we can share the slide deck out, to the group. All this stuff is also in the book, Host Coach, and I'll have a screen cap for that at the end. If you are really interested in this stuff, are really ready to get started and want to see all these lists, it's all available to you. So pricing is a big part of this algorithm. Most people, most hosts, 90% of hosts out there are just guessing at their pricing. They're picking a price. Maybe they're just saying the place is $200 a night, or maybe they're a little bit more active and they're doing some manual price adjustments. But what we find is that when we do this pricing ourselves, we tend to undervalue our weekends. There's no way I'll show you some examples of this in a minute. There's no way that someone's going to pay $500 a night, when my place is really worth $200 a night on a weekend, but they will. The bigger part of it is that most hosts keep that $200 a night price, not just on the weekends, but on the weekdays. And that is overpricing their weekdays. And so what they find is they sell all the weekends real fast, and then their weekdays are empty. And so what does that do to occupancy? What does that do to the algorithm that we just talked about? How is the algorithm going to respond to all that vacancy? They're going to give you less views because you're overpriced for those weekdays. So that's the problem, right? The solution is there exists third-party pricing tools that plug into your listing and get data directly from Airbnb that know the exact demand and supply for any given day. So, for example, if there's a concert coming to town, you may not know it. If there's an event coming to town, you may not know it. But if searches for that weekend, or maybe it's a weekday, I have a story where I had a listing, and all of a sudden I got to look at my pricing. I'm using the third party. I'm using Price Labs is the one that I use. There's others, there's Wheelhouse. And all of a sudden, this weird 4-day block in May, when my place was normally $250, $300 a night, went to like $750 a night. And so I looked around, was there a holiday? This is the beginning of May. It took me about a week, and I finally figured it out that it was James Madison University's college graduation weekend. And lo and behold, those 4 nights, not just the Friday and Saturday, but it was like a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, all went to like $700, $750, and it booked. I never would have known when James Madison University's commencement weekend was, but the third-party pricing tools do. So if you have an Airbnb, or if you think you're going to pick one up in a year from now, if you take one thing away from this presentation, is use a third party. And I stress third party. So some people say, well, doesn't Airbnb have an automated pricing tool? Nobody likes it. It's not really designed in your favor. But these third party tools, and again, they cost like $20 a month per property. They're very, very inexpensive. But this is really, what I say, where the magic happens. These pricing tools will get you the most value for your property and also price it to keep it booked. And that will increase your listing authority with the algorithms. So again, this is, the next slide that I'm going to show you is pricing example for this property. So if you can see that, if you hunt around, this orangish arrow in the middle of the screen is the low price for the month. This is October. This is a fall foliage. These cabins are located in along Skyline Drive. It's a great place to go to see the leaves change colors. So the low price is $327. The high price is nearly $797, $800. So it's 2.5 times. So as an individual host, I'd never have the guts. I wouldn't have the data, to take those types of price swings. But the pricing tools know the demand, and they set these prices, and I can tell you that they get them. And so when I really started to become efficient as a host was when I was able to initiate these tools and take that, when I say $2,000-$3,000 a month on that first cabin, I was doing $3,000 a month in revenue, and then instituting these tools, it was doing $6,000 a month, and now post-COVID, that same place is doing $9,000 or $10,000 a month. So that's another sort of why now factor, which is COVID was a little tough on the short-term rental business for about 2 months, but post-COVID, people are wanting to not travel abroad. They have the budgets for travel, and they're traveling more locally. In addition to doing more local travel, they're doing more work escape. We call it work away or bleisure, where people are getting tired. They're working from home, but they've been working from home. And so now they're working from their home, living in their home, and they want to just go somewhere and work somewhere different. And, then hike in the afternoon or take a walk on the beach. They can come to your beach house, work, and then go take a walk on the beach in the afternoon, just a change of pace. And so COVID has really driven the demand for short-term rentals and subsequently driven up the price and investor return potential. This is another property that's just foreshadowing the next slide. And this is just a proof point slide showing you that, the previous slide of the prices, those were potential prices. And then you can see here these, $500, $600, $700 nights. This got booked this 22nd, 23rd. That property booked for that weekend for $1,350. So 2 nights. This is a 4-bedroom property. I never would have thought to charge that. I never would have. I charged, $700 a night. But the tool knows what it's doing, and it can really make a major impact on your return on investment. You have a 7-night stay here, it's $608 a night. 2 nights at $674, 4 nights at $500 a night. So these tools are one of the things that make short-term rental investing, as opposed to your traditional, where you don't have control. If you have you're releasing an apartment, a condo or a townhouse out, maybe you get the opportunity to set your lease price once a year, and then you're sort of locked into that. It's a little bit more fun, a little more entrepreneurial to be able to see these big price swings and get these really large returns on these high demand occasions. So that's the fun financial part. Some people might then be wondering, well, how much work is this? I hear that short-term rentals are a little bit more hands-on. Is it a passive investment? I believe that long-term rentals, I had long-term rentals, and to me, it was 2 condos that I had, and I cringed every time I got a phone call. I didn't enjoy it. I hated to run out and, not to say that there aren't repair issues on short-term rentals, but just I guess I wasn't incentivized. I was just collecting $1,800 a month in rent, right? And maybe I was cash flowing, $200 on that door. But at the end, I have to be vacant for a month and I have to repaint. And I just didn't have the incentive. I wasn't excited to go fix the toilet or improve the cabinets or make improvements. But having these more exciting returns in short-term rentals made it, for me personally, a lot more rewarding. So what do we do? How do we control the workflow? I call, particularly with one short-term rental, I call it a bathroom business. Airbnb's got a great app. I'll probably find one here right now. There's just always a notification coming in. How did so-and-so do as a guest? So the app is always in your hands, but the important piece about managing is there's another tool. There are a group of tools called messaging operations tools. So the one that I use is called Hospitable, and they automate. Well, let's do this. Let's switch to it and come back. So this is a Hospitable screen, and you can kind of see all these little green toggles: new booking inquiry, new request to book, new reservation, expired, first morning, checkout. Those are all automated messages. So when somebody places a new booking inquiry or they book, they're going to receive from the tool a pre-made message from me for that property. Here's everything that you need to know. Here's how you get there. Here's the Wi-Fi passwords. This is what you want to know in preparation. So I'm not handling all of those. You won't be handling all of those routine information requests. This tool, again, this is one of these $20 a month tools, is going to handle 90% of your guest communications, leaving you to only have to answer the one-off questions. Where's the blender? Is the grill charcoal or gas? Can I bring, my pet? So 90% of the routine, repeated questions get handled through messaging automation. So it's kind of like having a property manager. Yeah, you are the property manager, but the guest communications are being handled in an automated fashion for 90%. So the next most important piece to operating is finding a great housekeeper. Your housekeeper is not just somebody who runs a vacuum and does some laundry. Your housekeeper really should be thought of as a valued business partner. My housekeepers, I have 3 different ones, and they are worth their weight in gold. I invest in them. I send them Christmas presents. I send them Christmas cards. I send bonuses in the summer when it's hot. I pay them promptly. They get a Zelle payment from me every Monday morning. The money just hits their bank. They don't have to chase me around. And anything that they need. Because on the other side of that, not only are they keeping the place sparkling clean, they're my eyes and ears. When a cabinet gets loose, or some sheets start to be worn, or the towels get some stains on them, my housekeepers are taking pride in that property, and they're telling me about those things. So I'm buying new towels. I'm calling a handyman to fix something that they can't repair, or I'm putting on a list to repair myself. But I just can't stress that finding a good housekeeper and establishing a really good relationship with them is another key driver to your success through reviews and having a great, clean, and well-maintained property. As for your reviews, we are entering the hospitality business. We're going to have a percent dissatisfied. We're going to have people that rave about our property, and that feels good. But we learn the most from where people are giving us constructive and sometimes not constructive criticism about the property. And so we always want to be looking through those reviews and trying to glean from them any way in which we can improve the property. Be it the fan was loud, or the air conditioner didn't get cold enough, or the pots and pans were old. We want to use those reviews as an opportunity for feedback on how we're going to make our listing better, which means that we're going to be better than the other 300 listings in our area, and we're going to increase our search placements as a result of increasing those reviews and increasing the value and value proposition from the property. So the goal here, as I said a little bit earlier, is to be a first page host. Be a host, be a super host, but follow the things that we've talked about today, the things that I teach, and your goal should be to be a first page host. So to recap, the 4 pillars for short-term rental success, and feel free to take your picture there, is find your where, make your listing pop, make it stand out, keep it priced for occupancy, and optimize the listing, continue to improve the listing, optimize it for search rank, and be a page one host. We like to conclude with a quote from our good friend Gary Keller: "Anyone can do it. Not everyone will, but will you?" So that's me. Thank you, everybody. I think we're probably at a great time spot here, about 48, 47 minutes, and I'm at your disposal to answer any questions.
Great. If anybody has any questions, if you want to tell me and I'll speak in here or talk loud enough. And then we're going to do ahas at the end. So please stick around because I'd love to hear, us to teach other people what we heard today. Do you have a question?
Is there a particular company or third party that he uses for the automated messaging?
Yes,
Yeah,
you said hospitable.
Correct. There are others that are more channel managers where they'll, if you are on multiple platforms, that they'll manage that and your audit. A lot of these softwares, there used to be messaging softwares, channel managers, and pricing softwares. What's happening, and you can see sort of in any industry, is those softwares that specialized in one piece are starting to overlap, where I think Hospitable might even have a pricing module now, right? So, but my recommendation, and I do this in the book a lot, is here's what works for me. This is what I know works. This is what, I can say beyond a shadow of a doubt that has been vetted with, hundreds of other coaching clients and just sort of the general community. Nobody's going to say to you, Price Lab sucks. Nobody's going to say Hospitable sucks. So I don't do a whole book report. I don't get into, I do mention when I'm talking about pricing that there's Price Labs, there's Wheelhouse, there's Beyond Pricing, but I don't do a whole book report on the pros and cons of each. I know that Price Labs is great. They're definitely the leader. There are other options, but that's the one that people find the most success with.
Has the pricing ever bit you? Like, has it ever been so out of whack that nobody looked?
Did you hear that, Colin?
Kind of. Can you repeat it?
Did the pricing ever kind of bite you in the ass? That it was wrong?
So the one
way or the
thing,
other?
yeah, one way or the other, definitely. So I've never seen it too high. What we want to do, and I didn't have time, we can talk about pricing for 2 hours. So, but what you do in the dynamic pricing module is you set your base price, and then it adds or subtracts to that based on proximity, based on demand and nearness for the booking. So over time, I increase my base price, right? As my listing has more and more authority, as I'm number one, always, that means I have more room to increase my price. So my base prices as an input into the software have doubled in the last 2 years. And that's a manual input from me. On the other side, what I think the softwares don't do an exceptional job at is discounting you enough in what I call the near term. So in anything beyond 15 days out, 15, 30, 60, 90, I always let the robots do their job. What they don't do is I manually look at, do I have any holes? Do I have a Tuesday, Wednesday next week that's, $200 a night and unbooked? I then start to manage. That's my role as an operator, as an entrepreneur, is I spend about 15 minutes every other day, and I go in and I overly, I put in a discount factor for those days. So I will start to say less 10%, less 11, less 12%. So to answer your question, I think that the pricing tools do an awesome job, but as a manager, as an entrepreneur, as an operator, to maximize your occupancy, you will do some manual near term within the 2-week window discounting to ensure full occupancy.
Great. We have a question up front.
Hey, Colin, my name is Chi. I really appreciate all the information you shared with us. And I do have a few questions. Let me see. So the first one, have you ever hired a company to manage the property for you as in a third-party company like Vacasa that does all of the things you mentioned?
I have not, because it's too easy to do it yourself.
Okay, the second question, there are,
And let me expand on that a little bit. I have nothing against them. I think they have their, Vacasa and Evolve, they have their role for someone who wants to, make an investment and just doesn't have any time whatsoever, or just really doesn't want to put that on their plate. But what you need to keep in mind is they're not going to manage your housekeeper for you. You still have to manage and pay your housekeeper and buy their supplies. Also, they're managing is the guest communications and the pricing. And the way they're managing the guest communications and the pricing, it's unlike, when you hire a traditional property management company, let's say have a beach house, in Hilton Head or whatever, or Myrtle Beach. Traditionally, I would hire a property management company for that because they're on site, right? They know the market. They're there physically to hand people keys. They're physically there to go plunge a toilet in the middle of the night, right? But the online property managers like Vacasa and Evolve, they're doing nothing any differently than I am. They're sitting in an office somewhere in Fargo, North Dakota, or I think they're in Colorado, one of them is. They just have a team who's managing these same automated tools remotely. So you're not getting that benefit of someone being in your market who can drive over and drop off the keys, right? They're just using the same automations that you could use remotely. My problem with them isn't the 10 or 20% that they charge. It's the fact that they don't really have an incentive to, so it's not just the cost, but they don't have the incentive to drive your prices and your service and your amenities the way that you would as an owner, right? So you're losing the 10 or 20%, but you also have to consider what is the 20% that I'm not getting in terms of maximizing, because they don't have the time to maximize every single listing. It's, they're trying to just streamline operations across a few hundred, right?
So I'm very new at this. So the second question I have, the fees from Airbnb that are charged, I heard somebody say they're getting charged to the owners instead of the guests. Is that correct? Besides the 3%?
In the United States, the Airbnb has two sets of charges. They charge the host 3%, and they charge the guest somewhere between 10 and 15%, and it's usually about 12%. So the guest pays a booking fee, a service fee, and the host pays a service fee of 3%.
You kind of answered that one, but I'll ask it again. I did hire a company to manage one of my Airbnbs because I didn't know all the information you shared today. And I was advised not to go directly to the site to actually look for my property because that drops my placement. And it conflicted to what you said, that actually the more the property is looked at, it brings you higher into placement. So I am confused.
That's false information. But perhaps, I always try to give people the benefit of the doubt. There's a reason, people, so to answer your first part of the question, if you go and you look for your property, you click on your property and you leave your property open on your computer, that's actually helping you. That's having more time on site. There's actually optimization companies that will do campaigns like that for you, where they spend time on your listing. So that part's incorrect. However, the part that may be correct is if you go to try to see where you stand in your listings and you've been to your own listing a few times, Airbnb is going to show your listing to you higher than it would someone else, because Airbnb is trying to customize the experience. So one thing that they do is if you've been to a listing, let's say it's not you, let's say I've been to your listing once, and then a month later I come back and I'm thinking about it again, Airbnb has placed a cookie on my computer and they know that I've looked at your property, and they're going to show me your property again in a higher placement. So when evaluating your own rank, what you want to do is put your browser in incognito or private browsing mode to know what what someone who's never been cookie, someone who's never seen your property, how they're going to see the rank placement. So if you want to keep track of how you're doing manually, the way to do that is to go into incognito mode and do that same search. Wilmington property, Charleston property, 2 bedrooms, 3 guests, these dates, and that will show you organically what everybody else will see.
Okay, 2 more questions, and I thank you so much. One is, since you are investing in different states, how are you able to have hands-on on what those companies are doing, like keeping up with the housekeepers and the property managers?
So I don't have a property manager. I manage my properties myself. I do not invest in multiple states. I guess I have 7 properties in the state of Virginia. I have 1 property in the Turks and Caicos Islands. It's kind of an outlier to everything that I talk about. We can talk about how it's different. There is a management company to that island property, but as such, it's a non-performing asset. You know, it does not. I don't like. It doesn't make the same types of returns. You know, I'd sell it if I could, but my wife won't let me.
Well, that is my last question. That since the market is quite high where we at the moment, would you, if you had the opportunity of selling with a high profit, would you do it, or would you accumulate enough profit from that property and hold on to it and keep Airbnb-ing it?
Yeah, the old joke, everything's for sale for the right price, right? You know, if somebody offered me millions of dollars for a property, but I can tell you that most of, and I'll sort of generalize here. Let's see, I'll do some averaging. So across my portfolio, my median property price is say $250,000, you know, as the purchase price. And the median gross income is say $10,000, and the median net income is $5,000. So you'd have to put a cap rate. You'd have to value that property, you know, based on a cap rate of $6,000 a month in cash flow, you know, for me to even consider it, right? So the cash flows are so strong right now. You know, I would never consider selling one. Nobody could ever pay me what, you know, the property's cash flow at this moment. So I think, but the next part of that story or that question is, am I still investing? I am still investing, right? So it's sort of like dollar cost averaging in stocks. And a lot of people will say this about properties. So, you know, we can look back a year ago and say, geez, everything was 20% less. We could look back 2 years and say everything was 25% less. But I will tell you that the rental incomes are going up faster than the sale prices. So if the house is 20% more, the rental income may be 35% more. And the second part of that answer is, I'm going to buy on the way up, I'm going to buy at the top, I'm going to buy on the way down, and I'm just going to keep buying, and it's going to all average out, right? It's just hard to find and win properties right now. It's not even necessarily the price. It's, you know, it's the time of the market. And so that's why I was talking about looking at some of those other areas that people might not have an eye on yet. You know, in the Carolinas, right? Be it some of those winery areas or some of those lake areas that aren't on the beach that not everybody is frothing over.
Great, thank you. I want to honor your time, but we do have one more question at least.
No, I'm here for you.
Okay, cool.
It'll be quick. When he's creating his pro formas, what type of cap is he putting on his debt service when he's analyzing properties? Like, is there a cap that you put on your debt service or no?
Did you hear that? Because there's no way I could repeat that. I'm gonna have to go.
Is there a cap? Is there like a cap rate that I'm looking for?
No. Are you, when you're analyzing properties and creating your pro forma for each one, are you capping, like, are you financing a lot of these 100%, 20% down? Like, what type of debt service are you looking for to put on these properties? Are you basing it on the cap rate or the cash flow?
I'm not basing it on a cap rate. So I like to invest in the $150 to $300 a square foot price range, because I know what my income is going to be, right? So I don't have to figure, the margins aren't so tight that I'm looking at, you know, Am I investing in a 3 or a 4 cap rate? I know that if I can get a hold of that property, right? I know it doesn't matter to me if I'm paying 240 or 260 or 240 or 280, because the margins aren't so thin, because I know I'm gonna gross 8, 9, 10,000. And I know exactly what I'm going to drop to the bottom line on my cost structure. And I've got some pro formas in the book, about that. I'll see if I flip to a page or something. But I have my complete pro forma in there. It's the margins are so good that we're not looking at the specific. So let's get back to the debt service. So obviously, the more you can leverage, kind of the better, right? Particularly in your first one. So I don't do 15s, I do 30s. My actual approach is I buy cash
And refi.
because I can win deals with cash. And then and then I make it better, right? I decorate it and I do my improvements. And then I get a, 6-month cash flow going, and then I refinance. And the last 2 places I refinanced, at $100,000 more than I paid.
And you're refinancing based off of the cash flow though, correct?
As often as possible, right? So there are,
Do they do cash
it's kind of an emergent industry where we are starting to find lenders that'll do asset-based lending. If you're going out and you're just buying your first one, your bank is waiting for you to walk in, and this is just going to be a second home loan, right? Your bank, if you're a homeowner and you're a professional, the bank is just waiting for you to come in and want to buy a beach house. If you say, I want to buy a beach house, I want to buy a cabin, they're going to say, hello, Mr. Smith, we've been waiting for you, right? And that'll be a 10% down type of loan. Once you get to, the second and third and the fourth, now they start saying, okay, you're an investor, and let's look real close at debt service ratios, right? And that's the traditional banks. What we're finding is that there are lenders now, Host Financial is one, Vizio is one, Sprout is one, that are doing more cash flow asset-based lending. Some will lend on the cash flow of the Airbnb. Some will lend on a debt to service ratio of comparable non-short-term rentals in the area. So comparable long-term rentals, which isn't perfect, but at least it's, it's based on rental incomes as opposed to personal debt service ratio.
And on that note, are you finding that those are significantly lower than your cash flow on the Airbnb? Or because here,
Oh, of course.
Here, there.
Of course.
Okay.
But if you're looking at a mortgage on a $250,000 house and just say it's $1,500, finding a $2,000 a month comparable is not too hard.
Have you ever done a line equity on a property, equity line of credit?
So I have not done an equity line of credit on a rental property. I had a home equity line of credit at one point that I'm sure somehow got involved in either a down payment or renovation of a rental property. I also have a stock equity account that I'm able to have a line of credit against. And that's probably been the most successful thing for me, is that I had a stock brokerage account that
Isn't that a fluctuating rate?
it is, but it's LIBOR plus a quarter or something. It's
Scary,
super low.
scary in this inflation.
Yeah, but when you're talking about LIBOR plus a quarter, I mean it's 2% versus the best home mortgage you'll get is 4%. The best investor type interest rate you'll get is around 6%. So, and those are general buckets, right? So please don't anybody beat me up and say, no, I can get it for for less. But yes, it is a variable rate. But that's why I said I usually go in with cash, and some of that cash was originally from those lines of credit. And I wrap that cash up, for say 4 or 6 months, and then put permanent financing on. So.
All right, any other questions before we move to ahas?
What's an aha?
Oh,
Somebody want to share what an aha is?
agents helping agents. It's basically like things that we heard just in case somebody else didn't hear it, basically.
And I want to do a really quick plug for Cullen. As you can see, he's actually a coach for Airbnb specifically. So if this is something that you want to pursue, this is something that he guides people, towards. So, yeah, and he's on Instagram and you can see his renovations. Him and his wife do this together. It's really cool to like see them start to decorate the houses and, all that kind of stuff. And of course, get his book. But any ahas? Can we get 3
And
ahas?
that QR code, Wendy, right there
Yeah.
is my dot. That's my
Perfect.
dot QR code. So if you just point your camera at it, it'll give you everything.
Yeah, if somebody wants to come up and do that, go for it. Yes, Lauren?
So I came before real estate, I came from the hospitality and hotel industry. I've never heard of the price lab, like a third party to price it based on, popularity. That's exactly what hotels do, exactly what airlines do. I
Yeah.
mean, golf courses even do that now for tee times. That is huge.
Yeah.
I mean, that was definitely a aha for me that I wouldn't have thought on my own to use for Airbnb.
Awesome. Thanks, Lauren. 2 more?
Everyone can do it, but they won't.
Anybody can do it, but most people won't. GK. One more aha and then,
Invest in the mountains, because those numbers.
Yep.
Yeah.
yeah, I think that was,
Returns up there.
that was one of my biggest ahas when Kyle and I saw him in Wilmington was like, let's stop focusing on Charleston. Like Charleston's numbers are not great, but let's not just like forget Airbnb. Like let's go find our vacation getaway somewhere, and make money and be able to go visit it whenever we want to. You know what I mean? So like you're finding a place that like we want to go to, that you want to go to. Like my daddy loves Montana. And I literally was like, oh shit, I need to find a spot for dad in Montana. Like that was the first thing that I thought of. So yeah, that's an awesome one. Well,
And I
thank you.
did try to keep this local about South Carolina, and I'll just sort of open it up, right? You threw out the Montana thing.
Yeah,
I was trying to, there's North Carolina, there's Georgia, there's, if you throw the net a little bit wider or
Yeah.
even out to Montana, there are, other opportunities. I was trying to kind of keep it, focused towards, to your state, but you can throw that net wider.
Yeah. Well, I like it also being, weekend getaway like Asheville, Savannah, upstate kind of stuff. We have really pretty waterfalls and stuff upstate. So this was great. But thank you so much, Cullen. Like I said, everybody reach out to Cullen if you have any additional questions. But I appreciate you guys for coming to the first Wealth Building Wednesday.
Thank you.
Do you want to?
So yeah, if anybody has questions, send them the emails there. Just one-offs is fine.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Cullen. I'm going to stop recording.